Is Donald Trump risking an international trade war, or is he mainly using the threat of tariffs as a form of leverage to get other things which he wants from different countries? And how should the British government and the EU respond? Now, the 10% tariff, which was due to be imposed on Mexican goods, has been delayed for a month after the Mexican government agreed to move 10,000 soldiers to its border with the US. Last week, the Colombian government agreed to let a flight of people being deported from the US land in Bogota, having initially refused to do so until Trump threatened to impose a 25% tariff on Colombian products being sent to America. So Is there a risk of an international trade war here, Dan, do you think? Because if there is, that would have calamitous effects on the world economy.
I don't think there is a risk of a big international trade war. Clearly, Donald Trump knows how to negotiate. We've seen him do that in the past, and I think there's be something in what your question is saying in terms of there'll be other things that he wants, if other countries want the tariffs to be reduced. I hope that this stays contained. But to your point, Iain, there's definitely a knock-on effect of, that saying, if America sneezes, we catch a cold. And our economies are really meshed together in terms of trade, and we should be cautious about that. And I think that's why, we might talk about this a bit later, but why this focus of this government on growing our economy, doing the things we need to do to get our house in order.
How's that going?
So we can be more resilient to the shocks that come. Because time and time again, this country has faced shocks, but we haven't been prepared for them. And so that's why I think we've got this right focus to be looking at what we can do to turn things around.
How do you prepare for this, though? Because it is a possibility. So presumably there are civil servants beavering away, wargaming what Donald Trump could do.
Yeah, and I think in the long term, what we want to do as a country is make sure that we improve our supply side. That's a term that us economists will use, but it means that can we have in this country more capacity, more infrastructure, so that our firms can be more productive and that we can pay people more? We haven't built enough in this country for too long. We're focusing on what we can do to get things built again in this country so we can have more growth without having higher prices. And of course, the risk of a trade war is higher prices. So I think there's some long-term benefits to this approach too, to make us more resilient in the face of future shocks.
Albie?
It utterly depresses me as a free marketeer that believes in free trade that we're talking about trade wars. I think it is utterly depressing that we're talking about tariffs, we're talking about trade wars, we're talking about trade barriers. We know that tariff-free trade brings prosperity. We know that free trade brings prosperity and economic growth. And we have an American president who calls himself a conservative, a businessman, someone who believes in the free market, putting up all of these tariff barriers, destroying supply chains across North America, potentially threatening tariffs on the European Union, which actually is quite a protectionist institution. If the EU becomes less protectionist, then that would be a good thing. But ultimately, we seem to be moving further away from the type of global economy that I would like to see, one based on free trade, one based on international cooperation between liberal democracies, and more towards something where America, Europe, China, Russia, India, Iran, all more isolationist. And that concerns me.
OK, Christopher.
Well, I think we saw it the last time that Trump was president, that he goes into negotiations with his own style. He goes and he threatened to annex Greenland. But underlying all of these things, there are serious points which are much smaller aims for him. So I think his nature is to go in big and then secure the actual thing that he wants. So in Greenland, it's security in case the Chinese invest in Greenland. In Panama, it was the operation of the canal. He wasn't going to invade Panama. I think the same way with Mexico. He had genuine issues about cross-border drug trafficking. And I think the UK, I think we can stay out of this one because we are not a problem as far as he's concerned because we buy their goods. So I think the downside for the UK is minimal. If we manage to move out of this and secure a free trade agreement with America, there's a big upside to this. And I wish the government well in trying to do that. It's in everyone's interest to have a good relationship with Trump and to try and move through these things and secure a trade agreement. So move on. One other thing, economic growth comes domestically in the end. You only trade abroad if you actually make the goods that people want abroad, and starts having a good domestic economy, good domestic regulation, sort that out, and the trade follows. But trade agreements, very good.
Emma, I suspect you might be a little bit more cynical.
Right on you, Iain. Okay, all right. But I will say, I might surprise you, I will say that I don't actually think that you're half right. I think that there won't be a trade war because I think most people will capitulate, or rather, most countries will capitulate because I think they realise, like I said, kind of reiterating the point that I made earlier, he is the one currently that holds the most power. Hence, I can tell by the way that you've all framed your sentences, and we refer to Trump and the US as king, and we are their kind of secondary, we're their kind of deputy, we're their kind of best friend that we hope that the big popular guy looks after. So I don't think there'll be a trade war because I think most people will capitulate. And it's only if we don't capitulate where we might be able to find a better balance in terms of kind of global
capitulating
dynamics.
would effectively mean lowering our tariff barriers to America.
Yes.
Which, Albie, you would think would be a good thing.
Yes, I think that would be a wonderful thing. I always think lowering tariff barriers are a good thing. Whenever we Brits have this conversation about things like chlorinated chicken, I always feel like pulling my hair out. Because I sort of think, well, no one is going to force anyone to buy chlorinated chicken if it's ever on sale in Tesco or Sainsbury's or Waitrose or Lidl or wherever it is that you shop.
We buy
and actually we buy chlorinated lettuce, exactly. Exactly. So
Meat
we
is
already
worse than
buy
lettuce,
these sorts of
Albie,
things.
let's be honest.
So it drives me insane when we have this whole conversation about chlorinated chicken. It holds up a trade deal with the biggest economy in the world, and then we're sat here wondering why we're not getting economic growth, and the Labour Party don't seem to care at all.
So may I just interject, if you don't mind, Albie? How does that connect fully in terms of this kind of the fact that we wanted to lead with sovereignty in terms of Brexit? We want to be our own boss. We want to have our own autonomy. We want to make our own laws. We want to kind of make our own mark on the global stage. And yet I listen to you as a Conservative saying, well, we must make sure that the King is happy.
I didn't say that. You said that.
No, I'm inferring.
You said that.
No, you didn't. I do apologise. That was not your words. I'm just ad-libbing here. This is what I've received as a result of listening to you.
Okay, let me be more clear.
Thank you.
What I was advocating for was lowering tariff barriers on international trade with the United States of America, which is of mutual benefit to the UK and the US.
Yes.
I wasn't saying we need to be capitulating. Free trade
But surely we
benefits
have to,
us
no?
all.
But the point is that after Brexit, we can do that.
Exactly.
If we
Are
were
you
still in,
sure, Iain?
I am sure, yeah, because legally we can.
that's silly.
what we were doing.
But if we were still in the EU,
Yes.
that wouldn't be our decision to make. I mean, we could be part of the decision,
Yes.
but we wouldn't be able to make that decision.
But we still have to capitulate in terms of power dynamics. And I think that's what I'm ultimately referring to.
Why do you say capitulate?
Because-
Do you not understand how negotiations work?
So negotiations is equal. I'm saying capitulate as in you might
Well,
think
negotiations
it's equal.
are very rarely equal, are they?
Thank you. That's the point that I'm about to make, Iain. We think it's equal, but someone loses. Someone is at a disadvantage when we think about power dynamics. And when we think about us versus the US, we're at a disadvantage. So therefore, there will be many things.
That can be true, but doesn't have to be true.
I agree.
I mean, if you think about the relationship between Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, for example, where he clearly held all the power, but she held most of the influence because she did have a big influence on him. So it's possible to influence a superpower. But then again, at times, he completely ignored her by invading Grenada and things like that.
Yes.
So there's never any consistency here. And that's what makes politics such fun, isn't it?
But then I agree. But then what if times are changing? And so therefore the goalpost moves. I'm going to leave it at that. But the goalpost moves. So therefore our perception and the way that I analyse these things should
we will be
shift.
looking at these goalposts a lot over the next few years, I suspect, certainly for the next 4.